Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shelf Life. This is Simran, and this is my podcast, Shelf Life. We talk about books, their philosophy, but most importantly, our personal relationship with the book. This week we have video, and we have a very special guest, Mr. Sudhir Putran. A little more about him. He has been in the corporate field for about 25, 30 years, right? And he's currently vice president of sales and marketing at Schneider Electric, and he's also led a lot of teams and businesses to continuous growth and success in his field. So I thought this would be a perfect topic to talk about with you. So I'm really glad to have you here, and just tell us your professional bio aside. Just tell us a little more about you that not a lot of people would know.
First, thanks for inviting me here, and hello to everyone. Yeah, so how do I start? It's about books. So, books is my first love. Okay, and I discovered this at a very, very young age. By nature, I'm an introvert. Uh, I, I, I didn't have friends when I grew up. I just had one friend, I think. Uh, so I discovered books, and it's been a great friend. It's been a great love. It continues till today.
That's really lovely. And I can actually relate to that as well because books have been my first love too. And I think I get a lot of it like looking at you and how you are with books and what I've heard about you with books. So, yeah, I get that. And I wanted to get more into it. Like, what was your first memory with reading and with books? And how did you discover it and all of that?
Yeah, actually, I grew up in a lower middle class family in Mumbai, and like I said, I was a loner. I didn't have too many friends. Uh, Very interestingly, I discovered what in the English dictionary is called a chest of, it's not like a luggage. It's a wooden box. Okay, and it's got a handle you can carry, and I don't know how people can carry it. It's pretty heavy. It's pure wood. Okay,
Uh-huh.
and this was my grandfather's. Okay, it was not my father's. It was my father's father.
Okay.
And I'm very impressed they read these kind of books. So, and I just discovered that box one day. It was full of books and amazing books.
Yeah.
You won't believe some of the books I read. And Mein Kampf by Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
Okay, now this book in my grandfather's chest of books was an amazing thing to find, because I don't know why they read it and what was the thought. And they were in that era, right? I mean, they were
Exactly.
in that era when he was around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe it made sense. And when I read the book, I was dispassionate in the sense I didn't form any opinion. The only thing that I took away from that book, and I'm talking of maybe I was 15 or 14 or 16, I don't know, around that age,
Yeah.
that this guy, Adolf Hitler, was an amazing leader. Okay, I don't think this is a popular opinion, but whether you like him or don't like him, your political views are different. But to lead, okay, and to lead for so long was amazing. So these was essentially how I slowly got in, and I was fascinated by these books. But it was initially, not so much fiction, not so much romance or love stories or anything like that. None of that. Maybe I read a lot of Agatha Christie. Okay, I don't know whether you have read any of them. These are all
I've read a
mystery
few.
books.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know why I found it fascinating, and on hindsight,
Hmm.
I think I found it fascinating because it used the brain.
Hmm.
Okay, there was logical deductions to be done
Hmm.
to find who was the murderer. Okay, and that fascinated me, and how the brain works. And at that early age, I
Hmm.
realized that I read Perry Mason. Okay, it was a lawyer who would, and again he would use his brain, and some things like that fascinated me.
Hmm.
And I read tons of them. I still have all that with me. I got a big
Oh,
library, and I
that's
got all
wonderful.
those books.
Yeah. And more on that, I think I really love the fact that your early influence was your grandfather. I mean, did you ever see him reading like in front of you, or did he read around you? Is that how you got into it?
No, actually not. And my grandfather, when I first saw him, was very old.
Mm-hmm.
He was retire. He was retiring. He retired and he came to our house. Okay, he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't staying with us,
Yeah.
and he was unwell. Okay, so most of the time I've seen him unwell. But the in leadership, storytelling has a big place. Okay, and I'll talk about it later. But why I'm bringing this now is in my early childhood,
Hmm.
and I don't know whether this generation ever understands this. In my early childhood, where we didn't have TV, mobile phone, nothing, there was nothing there at that time.
Hmm.
He would sit with me every evening. Okay, in the evening we would sit in outside the house,
Hmm.
and he would tell me stories about Ramayana and Mahabharata.
Oh
Okay,
wow.
and there would be each episode he would tell me.
Hmm.
Now it is his viewpoint, but what has stuck with me is that if he had not told me,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I would have not read it anywhere. Okay, because I don't think I have picked up a book and read the whole story. My
Yeah.
next edition of Ramayana Mahabharata was from the TV serials.
Yeah.
Okay, and which is all maybe glamorized, exaggerated a bit. But he passed it on vocally. It's a vocal book. Okay, he talked to me. I never seen him read a book. I never seen anything. I've not seen my dad read a book, by the way. But they were all his and granddads. And I'm sure they read it in their youth, in their young age.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then finally, never found time and the family grew and things like that. But they were amazing books, that treasure. I
Hmm.
still have them. I still have the same wooden box with me here.
Oh
Okay,
wow.
I brought it to Bangalore all the way. It's got because it's his. It's my grandfather's.
Yeah.
Okay, I just romanticize about how he must have bought it, what he must have been thought, how
Hmm.
did he stack the books inside,
Yeah.
why did he buy this book, what is the story behind buying this book, okay,
Hmm.
why did he want to read Adolf Hitler,
Yeah.
so what are the engagement with that thought, so that just amazes me, I love that.
Yeah. I
Eh,
completely understand. Yeah. Because even with me, I think one book that my mom gave me, which she said that her dad gave it to her. So my grandfather gave it to mom when she was younger, and it had to do with. It was a very old book. We did a podcast on it too, Jabel's Children. So I didn't. Obviously, I when I was reading it, I really wanted to understand why he must have read it and what he must have thought of it, and that can be so interesting. Yeah, I totally agree. So that was your initial relationship, your first relationship with books,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
the
absolutely, and I relate to the point you just said about, and I watch I listen to all your podcasts, and I also what I'm fascinated about these podcasts is it's more about the engagement with the book. Why did you pick it up? How did it touch you? And that's what I like about this show.
yeah, yeah, that's something that I feel most passionate about, because I know that a lot of people don't read as much, but one of the reasons that they give is that because they can't sit with the book for that long, they don't have the time to it, and they'd rather just watch a movie. But the truth is that we read books because they directly can influence our lives, and they can really change how we see things and what we do about it. So that's something that, yeah, I really, really appreciate that. And I vouch for that. So that's your early relationship with books. But tell us about a book that really struck out to you, maybe during your early years or when you were a teenager, maybe even later in life. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, I quickly migrated out of mystery books.
Hmm.
Okay, and I think around 15, 16, I was slowly wanting more.
Hmm.
And think of a boy who's in the lower middle class. We didn't have too much money, but a lot of aspiration. My father put a lot of dreams in me, okay, of what I could do. And I think he brought us some self-help books. Okay, it were books which would which self-improvement books, and there were many. Okay, and I read many when I was, just imagine, 16 or something. And they were I read about, there's a book from Norman Vincent Peale called Positive Thinking, The Power of Positive Thinking. Okay, then at some later stage there was about Think and Grow Rich and all those books. The one which really made a huge difference to my life, and every youngster I meet with dreams, gift him this book, him or her. Okay, and whomever I mentor, I give a book, okay, of this one, which is from Dale Carnegie.
Yes.
Okay, and it's called How to Make Friends and Influence People. Okay, and this is an is a book which I refer even today. Okay, it has stood with me all my life.
Mm.
If I have done anything, or I owe it to that book.
That's,
Okay, and it's been amazing. Okay, so that's one book really which touched me. Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely agree. I read Dale Carnegie I think as a teenager as well, when I was just entering my teens, and it helped me so much. I absolutely can't. I feel like most self-help books now are just a rip-off from Dale Carnegie's books. I think they've just taken so much
Yeah,
from
yeah,
him, and they just build
yes,
around the same concept. So yeah, I read
yes,
How to Win Friends and Influence People as well, and
yeah,
I think I did win friends and influence people. So that was that was lovely, and I think more like getting more into the concept of self help. I think I would define it more as it's not very strictly that genre, but I think any book that can shape us, shape our worldview, and shape how we live our lives, I think can be described as self help. So for me, one of the earliest books that I read that helped my life could be The Diary of Anne Frank. I think I was maybe 10 or 11 years old when I read it.
mm,
And the simplicity of it, the honesty in it, everything, I related to it so much. But it just helped me shape my life in a certain way. And I really love that. So, is there any book that you read that probably doesn't fit the category of self help, but it still shaped your life and it still made you take a certain path?
I think this is the book. Okay, this is the one talked about, and you just used one skill which he talks about. Okay, you just demonstrated that. What you did now was, while I was talking of my book, and I said you wanted me to sort of feel more comfortable, and you talked about the book which shaped you.
Yeah.
So one of the things he keeps telling is that, say for example, his his thoughts on, let me talk about some of the things which has stuck with me till now. It doesn't matter whether you want to use it to woo somebody, date a boy or a girl,
Mm.
whether you are trying to sell a product,
Mm.
or whether you're a leader. Okay, it will work in any of this. Okay, so simple things like, if when somebody buys something from you. Okay, and imagine you have met a salesman and you bought something anytime in life. It's not just because the product is good, it's not just because the price is good, it's because there is something about the sales guy, the person selling to you, that seems honest to you.
Mm.
Okay, so it's his persona is important. Now this book helps you shape that persona. Okay, for example, if I go to a customer and I talk about what interests me, what I want to do, and I come to sell you a machine,
Mm.
it doesn't work. I have to talk about what is good for the customer. Okay, and one of the things he says is, you will, to do that, you will have to be genuinely interested in that person. If you want somebody to like you have to first be genuinely interested in that person. And what does that mean? It
Mm.
means you do homework, you do research about that person, You find what she likes, which, and you can, today it's far easier in social media. Okay, you can quickly find, which political party this person likes. You can just go through its tweets and you'll know where he's aligned or she's aligned. You can go to LinkedIn and find the taste, which kind of things does that person follow, or on Facebook you can find where. So it's so easy to be genuinely, that's the investment of time you're doing to do research. Okay, so he said this so many years back. He said this almost 35, 40 years back or more, that look, you, if you want that person in front of you to be liking you, first thing is you have to be genuinely interested in that person. And the key word is genuine.
Yeah.
You can't fake it. You can't be artificial. You need to smile a lot. Okay, you need to, there is nothing like giving sincere appreciation.
Yes.
You should not be stingy while appreciate. And this works at home. It's not only a business place. It works with couples. Okay, so make sure you see something nice, please appreciate. And if you see something not nice, okay, if suppose something you want to be, and this works for leaders, I think it's a problem and people have to learn this. When you want to criticize somebody, one, please do it in a room one-to-one, not in public. Appreciate in public, criticize when you are in a room one-to-one. And when you criticize, make it soften it. Don't criticize the person. Don't humiliate the person.
Yeah.
Dale Carnegie said this all this long back, and it is worth gold even today.
Definitely.
So I think this is just so powerful. And there is an example he quotes that time, and I'll tell you, I used it some 100 times in my career. Okay, he says, suppose you are a salesman for a black car. Okay, but the customer always buys red cars. I mean, this are car companies. Okay, not the color. So he says the traditional sales guy would go there and criticize or tell everything bad about that other car. Okay, the car which he buys, the customer normally buys. So you will say, oh, that is terrible. That's why I know it is low fuel, very low. He says the moment the customer hears that, he hears you actually telling him that you don't like his judgment and taste in cars, because all his life he was buying that other car, and you're saying that other car is useless. But he's not listening as the other car is useless. He's listening that you are useless, you don't know what's a good car.
Wow.
So what he would suggest doing, he says, you agree with him that the car he buys is great. He says, yeah, that's a very good car, and that's the reason you've been buying all along. Okay, and keep saying. And he says, how long can you have a conversation where both of you agree on one thing? So it will stop at some stage. And then he's going to listen to why your car is also good.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get a chance to change his opinion. Okay, now these are powerful ones. And for a 16-year-old, when I read this, I can tell you, it just changed my life. I've been using it again and again, and I got it as an audiobook in my mobile phone. I listen to it when I bathe, I sometimes when I go to sleep, because these are fresh, it's powerful. It's like a Bible to me.
Absolutely. I agree with everything you've said, because it really is so powerful, and so many things that he talks about are still applicable. And to think that they can just travel through time like that and still be relevant, it is just wonderful. And one of these things that you spoke about, that the preparation, he lays so much emphasis on preparation, on doing the hard work, doing the homework, and knowing what you're talking about, knowing who you're talking to, and understanding them and seeing them as a human being, as an individual, and not just as a customer or as a product that you have to, try to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he looks at them as people, and he urges you to look at them as people. It's such a shift from the reductionist way that we look at things, right? And all our
Correct.
lives we've been taught,
Absolutely.
especially in, I think, in corporate field, you would know, but I think that there is this tendency to oversimplify things. I think you tend to look at things as it's either A or B. There's no middle ground to it. But I think to hear you say that there is a middle ground, there are people that you cater to. It's not just a customer. It's not just X Y Z. It's someone that you're trying to influence, trying to get to your side. So that's just wonderful that you said. And another thing that I liked about what you said was that it has the power to shape leaders and how they lead, and it
Mm.
it says so much about that. I'm sure that if all our leaders in the world would read Dale Carnegie, it would just make the world a better place, I feel. So yeah, it is absolutely lovely. And I think even I read Dale Carnegie when I was probably 13, 14. And yeah, it absolutely influenced me. And even one of the earliest books that I had in my house, that I think it was from my dad's collection, was 50 Tips for Speaking Like a Pro. And it's not Dale Carnegie, but it's definitely very similar to what he used to talk about. Very simple book. You can just breeze through it. It's not literature, but it's so powerful. And I still remember most of it. And yeah, I think that Dale Carnegie also, shape how you look at literature in any way? Did it how did it shape you as a person? I really want to know. I'm very interested now.
Yeah, I'm saying and I'm just picking up from where you left. Today's world, the problem with leaders, which you mentioned, is that we have on a fingertip. I can tell you about myself. I can tell, I'm sure prime ministers and presidents of countries have much more than I have, but on a fingertip, I get the complete intelligence of a customer. Okay, I can know everything. Artificial intelligence can give you statistics about everything. Everything. It will profile a person. But my I keep telling my teams again and again that nothing, sorry, nothing to replace relationships, personal relationships. The warmth of a personal relationship can never be replaced. And if I learned one thing, and you said, how does it personal in my personal life and everything, I have learned to invest in relationships, because all this data, all this is absolutely of no use if you cannot build genuine relationships with my customers. Irrespective of where I worked, I still have relationships with them. I still talk to them. I still greet them on their birthdays or whatever. I have nothing to sell to them, okay, because they are from a different industry, stuff like that. But that's what matters to me. The baseline is technology can give you a lot of things, but what it won't give you is this human warmth. And that's why tomorrow robots or anything can't replace a lot of jobs. It can replace some jobs which are repetitive, but it won't be able to replace many of these jobs which need what is called as the human touch, that 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 understanding which no amount of data can give. That's why if you see the successful prime ministers or presidents of the world have been those who could go beyond data, beyond all the research what people say or give you. And there are a lot of research institutes, okay, which will tell you what people are thinking, but they go beyond that. They go and reach directly, and they try and find out what are the majority of people thinking, and they have the pulse across the globe. They are the ones who succeed, not the ones who have a lot of data. Okay, so that's a big difference, and that's how it's personally touched me. It never let me get carried away by technology. Never. No technology can help. It's kept me grounded, that we are dealing with human beings. Okay, this human being I'm going to talk to might have having a bad day today. He might have had a fight with his wife in the morning when he came to work. Okay, and I'm going there, and I, I have to acknowledge that when I talk to him. And I'm willing to. I remember I could go for an hour on a drive, or I'm traveling to another city or another country, or I'm meeting people. And I realize the moment I walk in that he is having a bad day, and it's something to do with his personal life. And I will come back without talking to him about business, and I can just waste my whole time. What is more important is to recognize what is happening in him and give him that respect
Yeah,
instead of trying to make a sale. So that's very important.
yeah,
That I think that's the place where it really made a difference to me. It kept me grounded.
absolutely. I agree. I think the problem that we have right now with our culture and the way that it is that everything with technology, it's everything has become so instantly gratifying. We've moved into that space where everything is available at any given point of time, and it can be good for us obviously, but it reduces that incentive to work hard, and working hard is a virtue, and we don't realize
Yeah,
that. And Dale Carnegie
yeah,
spoke about it at length. He said that you have to put in that effort to
yeah,
get to know someone, to learn about them, to know how something works, and there's no shortcuts to it. He mentioned that in one of his books. I think it was How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. He mentioned that
yes, yes,
that you can write as many self-help books, and you can try to give as many formulas to it, but at the end of the day you have to put in that effort, and every situation is different. There is no formula to it. So yeah,
absolutely.
I absolutely agree with what you said. And I think one of these other books that really, when you spoke about data and these research articles and all of these studies that are done that try to categorize or compartmentalize a lot of things. One of these books that I read, it was actually a self-help book only, Freakonomics, if you've heard of it.
I
Um,
was going to say that just now to you.
Lovely. Yeah, I read that and I was just blown away when I read it, because it gives you like data, concrete data, and but it explains the situation behind it. It explains the context. And it's just so lovely. And do you want to talk more about that?
Absolutely. And Freakonomics was a book which I read many, many years back. But again, that helped me because it just shows that statistics are completely useless.
True.
Okay, because you can play with it the way you want. I'll give an example of one thing that book talks about. Okay, they did a research in the US, and they found that now I don't know the exact months, I may be wrong on the months, but they found that those born in say December or November are most likely to become athletes. The state level athletes or the represent the country. Those born in October were never part of any state or the country teams. Okay,
Okay.
which was that statistics. And when you listen to this, you just wonder, what is happening? Why is it like that? Statistics by themselves never tell a story.
Absolutely.
You have to go deeper to find. And then they found that those who were there was an age limit for getting into class, okay, into one of those levels, different levels of class. So at the basic level, so the cutoff age, I think it was, October, September was sort of the, if you are lower, or if you are October, September, if you're lower than September, you go to a lower class, okay, which is okay. If you're October period, you can get into the next class, okay. So which is the next level of class. So if so to give an example, if you're born in August, September, you'll have to wait for a year to join the school when you are a child. But
Mm.
if you're October, you can just squeeze into that because you are on that borderline. Now
Right.
imagine an October born has gone into a class, and in that class are all people who are actually in age bigger than him or her. Okay, because now in that class, when they get into sports later on, the others are almost 6 months to 1 year elder to him, so they are bigger than him.
Hmm.
So when they go to basketball selections, they get selected because they are taller than him. Okay, and they're stronger than him for so soccer. So naturally, they got left out. It had nothing to do with any genetic ability or solar any alignment or nothing. It was so he just brings out the fallacy of making decisions based on statistics, because statistics can freak you out. It can give you completely wrong decisions.
Absolutely, yeah. And
I'm glad you read it. Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely love that book. And one more thing that, Freakonomics, I think, like you said, it can be a Bible for anybody who's even thinking about economics as a field or trying to get into that, because it gives you such a wider perspective of how, you can't just look at statistics. It doesn't prove anything. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and even it goes beyond that. It analyzes pop culture, and it relates to economics and how it's it can be shaped. Even social media is shaped by what's happening in the economic world, and we don't see these parallels in our daily lives, right? But it's so true, and I absolutely agree. And moving more into this topic of um, how dangerous almost these reductionist views can be, where we just focus on research, where we just focus on statistics. There's one author that I would really like to mention. Her name is Caroline Leaf, and she's a neuroscientist. And I think, and I wanted to bring this up because in my free time when I'm not reading fiction or literature, what I like to do is I really love to read up on the brain. That just interests me a lot. So I read a lot of articles on what's happening to your brain and how do you manage it, and what chemistries are involved. And I really love it. Really interests me. So she has a book called Switch on Your Brain, The Key to Peak Happiness.
Mm.
And it's so interesting when I read that book, because she talked about how our whole view of our brains is so reductionist, because we have been fed by media and by the narratives around that your brain can't change, and it controls everything, and it's the biggest part of you. But that's not completely true. You can change your brain, and it's completely possible to do that, and your brain is plastic. And it's so interesting to read up on all these myth busting books, right? So yeah, I wanted to mention that. And if there's any other suggestions that you have about what our listeners could read up on if they want to know more about stuff, you can leave that here.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I have read articles from her, which you mentioned just now. In fact, it's basically a set of grooves on the brain. Okay, and these grooves are connections of neurons. Okay, and how they connect each other. Now, what she says is you can change this.
Yeah.
And how do you change this? There are various methods of changing.
Mm.
One of the simplest, and anybody can try at home, is try doing something which you don't do
Mm.
for 20,000 hours, say. Okay, I don't remember the exact hour, whether it was 10,000 hours or whatever. And you will see a change. Okay, you will start seeing that you behaving differently. Okay, but what it means, and don't worry too much about how many hours, but it's more about if you start repeating something which you have never done before, force yourself to do it every day. Say, get up and go for a walk in the morning. You don't like you hate it, but please, can you do it for 1 month and just do it, and then you'll see on the next day after a month, you automatically get up and you want to do it. You suddenly become it into a different fashion.
Absolutely.
And there is a book by that lady's first name I remember is Rhonda. It's called The Secret. Okay, I don't know whether you read
Rhonda
that
Byrne.
book.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
read
yeah.
it?
Of
Now
course.
again, what she says what she says is in a way about how do you groove your brain differently. Though she doesn't say that, she uses a different language. But she says the secret is that you start believing and telling yourself that this is what I am going to be. Okay, I'm going to be the fittest guy. And one of the things I tell myself, I told myself long back that I will be the fittest guy at 60, and I'll be 60 pretty soon in the next few years. So once you tell yourself this again and again, your brain starts telling you what you need to do. You need to walk, you need to take care of your diet, you need to sleep well, you need to stop letting go. It will teach you. Brain is powerful, ever changing. You can you have to make sure you master it. It's
Yeah.
a science. Okay, and there are wonderful books on this. Okay, and now since I'm switching a lot to electronic reading, YouTube on this topic, so I read or listen a lot to brain is linked to happiness,
Mm.
about fitness, about stuff, and those kind of things. But you're right, that lady is wonderful, and
Yeah,
I think hopefully people listen to it, because I keep hearing this whine that, oh, I'm too old. How can I change?
absolutely.
You can.
You can.
You can change, and there are millions of examples of people doing great stuff at very old age. Like the simplest one, which everybody knows, is Colonel Sanders, I think, of Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Yeah,
Okay, and he started this. What his age was, post 70 or something, and he built
yeah,
an
I think so.
became a legend.
Yeah,
Okay, so I think examples of the brain is one of the most wonderful thing God gave us. It makes us
absolutely.
different from anybody else.
Mm.
It's a good thing and a bad thing. The brain, you see, is why we are different from animals, is because we have two things we can do with the brain lets us do. One is in the back of the brain where you store memories. Okay, so you have a, a memory bank with you, and the front of your brain, which lets you imagine the future. Okay, so I mean, creative people like you, for example, use a lot of your front of the brain, because you imagine, you visualize things, you
Yeah,
write stories, your written books, you visualize. The back of the brain is important because it tells you that the last time you did this, you had this issue, so just be careful, maybe you need a better plan. Now these two things can be your slave. It can do great things for you, or it can cause misery to you. Okay, so it's how you use them. These are amazing stuff which God gave only human beings.
absolutely. I agree with everything you're saying, because even when you said that, people reach a certain age and they say that, oh, now I can't change. Now it's too late. I feel like I've seen around me, I've seen people that who are as old as me, and they will say that I know that this is wrong. I know that I probably shouldn't be doing this because it doesn't help in the long run or something like that. But they will still do it because they think I'm too young. I don't have to change. I mean, it doesn't affect my life. But it's not true. I mean, you can change at any given time you want. And it's so powerful to know that you have a choice in what you do. You are absolutely responsible for your actions. And yeah, you can change your brain. You can change everything. And Caroline talks about this as well as, we're going back to something that Dale Carnegie said, that it takes hard work. It's as simple as that. You have to put in the work. You have to you have to plan it. You have to organize yourself. But at the end of the day, it works out. And I think all self-help books, in their essence, talk about that same thing. That when you put in that effort for yourself, when you do the hard work, it will work out. And there's no way that it won't. So yeah, I love what you said, and I totally agree that people really take it for granted that, and they just undermine this fact that if you've done this a certain way for so long, now it's fine, you just have to go with it. We kind of give up that control over their life, but it's so sad, and I really wish that people read up on these books, and they can learn from them and try to implement
Yeah,
it in their lives. Yeah.
yeah.
And is there any other book that you read that
True.
really made you feel this way, that you were in control of your life? Actually, I could ask you another question. Did you always have this perception that you were in control of your life and you did have a say, or did you come to that conclusion later on, or something happened?
Uh, I don't know. That's a good question, by the way. Okay, because I pondered over it, and a lot of people, young people, ask this. But to be honest, I would like to say I planned my life, but I things happened life, and as I see that there were insecurities, there were period of uncertainty, of being scared of life at times. So all those, it was a very normal life. But I know I could very simply say God or destiny, but I don't want to say that. What I want to say is I have realized, and if there is one message to any young people, is that uh, just stay focused on doing, your, like I use the word hard work, but I'm just saying doing your work. Okay, do your work very sincerely. There are no shortcuts. Okay, there are no shortcuts in life. So be honest, be ethical, don't try shortcuts. Take the hard route, take the highway of life. Okay, because that is safer and gets to your destination faster. Okay, and believe that there is somebody who's some creation who's taking care of us and leading us. Okay, and believe that you, and I got me that thought, whereas to say that I'm God's chosen child. Okay, and you know what it does when you keep saying that you are the God's chosen child, that you believe that there is a purpose, somebody leading you. Okay, that's a path which he's taking you to. And so just two three messages. One, I would say, is, please just keep working. Don't worry what where you are right now. You're not progressing in your career, you had a breakup or whatever. Don't just worry. You're part of a larger plan. Just keep keep working sincerely, working hard, take risk. Opportunities come, and many times we say, oh, but I don't think I can do it, or it sounds difficult. Believe me, every time I've taken a risk, it has never failed. I can vouch that anybody who's taken a risk can never tell me that it failed. He would have learned tons of things which later on in life you look back and say, that was the best thing I did in my life, to take that risk. So please take risks. Okay, go to this path which is not trodden, it's unknown. Okay, there is nothing known about it. Please go there.
Yeah.
Okay, and trust there is somebody bigger who's guiding you. Okay, just keep it simple. Your life is easy, it will take you through. There will be insecurities, there will be things which will worry you, but you will be through. It's actually the people who are scared who listen. But to me, I think, it's not that any particular thing or something, but I realize if I look back, it's just continue doing work honestly, sincerely, and you will get that. Take risks.
Yeah, I agree. I think what happens with what I've learned is, especially, I think obviously I don't have that much experience to say, but I think what I've learned is that most of the times when we're doing our work and when we're on our path and we're living our lives, most of the times, most often, I think we get in our own way. I don't know how we do that, but I think we kind of obstacles we create obstacles on our own. I get that there are things that can happen to your life that you probably don't have control over, but the way that you see it, the way that you perceive it, the way that you interpret in events, I think that forms a bigger impact on you. So yeah, I think we do get in our
Yeah.
own way, and if we have a strong enough base, if we believe that there is another purpose for us that is bigger than just this problem that has come, yeah, we definitely can progress, and if we continue to do the work, it will work out. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, in fact, two things you said. Let me just pick on that, which I liked. Which one will I take first? Okay, the one which you talked of, that's a noble purpose. Okay, which is what Dale Carnegie said.
Hmm.
He said, if you want to motivate a team of people, don't talk to them about that. Okay, let me give. If in my listeners somebody from my team is there, they'll know what I was doing. But I would never talk about numbers. I would not talk of this month's orders. I've been meeting, or this in my earlier role when I was handling India. Now I handle global, so I had to think of. So in that, I would always talk about in my earlier role, how do we make India being recognized in the global forum? How can we make that India is the best performer? Now, any sales guy is more worried about his bonus, meeting his number. But the moment you talk of something which is beyond you, which is India, which is nationalistic, now they want to do well. It's like a soldier. If you think the biggest motivation you can give to anybody is for a soldier, the soldier gives his life for a purpose which doesn't take care of his, it doesn't get his increased salary or bonus, or no, it's for India. It's that whole flag thing. Okay, now it's built in from the day they go for training. Okay, so how do we in our own teams, in our organizations, talk of a purpose which is much bigger? Like today morning I was listening to a talk by, I won't name the company, it's an auto company. Okay, it's a car company in India, and that CEO was talking about how he was not talking about how good his cars are. Okay, by the way, he was talking about how they use some part of the money they get from the car sale for doing social work and educating girl child. Okay, in the country. Now he in his organization is building a nobler purpose. He says every car you sell, a certain portion of the money I'm going to give it to the girl child, to train them in Bastar and other remote areas. Now giving a larger purpose. Okay, that's one thing which you said, which it, even Dale Carnegie said that, and that's very, very powerful, I can tell you. The second thing which you said just now was also about we coming in our own way. And I will tell you that's very powerful, because the other thing I realized is we are all controlled by our self talk. What do I tell myself? I tell myself about everything. Huh? I tell myself about how I look, how I talk, how I behave. Can I do this? I can't do this. I'm fat, I'm thin, I'm looking old. All this is my self talk. Now I realize that if you can just change your self talk and change it forcibly, okay, just change it. The moment the talk changes, your actions change, your behavior change. And because your behavior and actions change, your output changes. What you deliver changes. So the key is self-talk. Now, every time when you say motivation from outside, it is somebody trying to talk to you, and trying to manipulate your brain. It could be any way. But isn't it nice if you could talk to yourself
Oh,
instead of outside world? You
amen
can
to
talk to
that.
yourself. You are in control. You are the boss. You tell yourself what you want to tell, and you will definitely tell only good stuff. Okay, you'll for example, one of the things I've eliminated from my life very early is hate or criticize. And I told my wife that every time you see me say anything negative about anybody in my family, or even in my from my workplace, if I'm talking and cribbing about this guy, please point out. You don't have to do anything else. Don't yell at me. Just point out. Just say just say that, look, you're saying something negative about somebody. That's all. And I want to cut it down, so that I don't have to think negative about anybody. I want to do that. It's a self-talk. I want to keep telling myself, no, you will not. Okay, so I think self-talk is another message I would give, and that needs a little maturity, of course. But you need to keep talking to yourself and monitor what is the voice. What is the voice that is going in? What is the voice that you're listening from inside? Please monitor it. Keep listening to what you're talking to yourself. Okay,
Yeah.
very important.
Absolutely. I think one of these things that you spoke about, the self-talk, right? I was reading Caroline Leaf's work, obviously, and even she talks a lot about this. And I realized that I had this tendency to very, like, anything that would happen, if it was any kind of setback, I had this tendency to say, oh, but this always happens. This always keeps
Uh,
happening. And that and she when I read that, she has this theory that never use the word always, just don't use it,
mm,
because there is no permanency. Things will change. It's a part of life, and there is no there's no pattern. You have to just keep going.
yeah,
And I recognize that, that I
yeah,
used to keep doing it, that I would keep saying, oh, but this always happens, it always has to go this way, I always say this, I always do this. But I stopped that. I've completely almost eliminated it. And it definitely has changed the way I look at things, for sure. So yeah, I completely understand what you're saying.
yeah. This is also good because used to do the same thing. What I've done is I've not stopped it. I've replaced it.
Hmm.
Okay, and I replaced it with what is that I try to look at good things that happens to me in a day. I mean, we all have good and bad both happening.
Yeah.
Our problem is we focus on the bad things. And when I just think of the good thing and I say, oh, always good thing happened to me.
Hmm.
Okay, good things always happen to me. I'm God's chosen child. So, only nice will happen, only good. Today, there's a important presentation. I know I will rock because only good things happen to me. I'm lucky. These are the words I keep telling myself. In fact,
Yeah.
Dale Carnegie tells us a trick of, what he says is, what is this called? He calls it the yes technique. Yes. Okay. So he says, if I, okay, it can be a customer or a girlfriend you're proposing for marriage. Okay. So whichever. So you have to get her to say yes. Okay. Now, before you pop the question, get her to say, and this is a technique, you can try it. You can try it, anybody at home. If you get this person to answer as yes at least 4 5 times, and then the sixth question is, will you marry me, kind of question, you will find that most likely that she says yes is strong. And how do you get the first 5 questions as an answer of yes? It could be as simple saying, it's a great day today. So nobody will say no, so they'll say yes. Or something she's done, and then you say, uh, uh, is that a new dress, for example? So
Hmm.
she said yes, because it's a new dress. Okay, so ask her the questions which will get a yes answer.
Hmm.
Or a customer, okay, you ask her the questions which will get an yes. Mentally, the brain
Hmm.
is now, you're manipulating the brain to give a affirmative answer, yes. And you'll get an answer, will you give me the order? So he'll say yes. Okay, the chances of saying yes are much higher. Now this might sound manipulative, but I use it in the context of what I do to myself. I get myself to say yes answers, okay, to myself. This is the self talk. Okay, and say nice things about myself to me. So I agree with you. So I think, this thing which you eliminated from your, thoughts is a great powerful thing, because this is what hurts most people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she said that it's the words always, never, and should. These three words, if you keep using them too much in your life, they will hamper your worldview. So yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think we're really over time, so we'll have to wrap this up. But I'm really glad that you agreed to do this, and I've learned so much through this one session that we had, and I would love to discuss this more with you, but we will have to wrap up. And before I let you go, I'd just like to ask you. You said that How to Win Friends and Influence People was the book that changed your life, right? Um, why do you think that book was written? Why? Just why?
It's very interesting because I have read a lot about the author himself. Okay, and that author went on to become one of the billionaires in the US. Okay, that's a Carnegie Institute and all that. So this is, he's become famous for his book. filthy rich. He came from very poor background. He finally committed suicide and died.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have thought a lot of why he wrote this book. Okay, and how is there why did he end the way he did? Okay, didn't it give him peace? Okay, so is there something else missing beyond what is written? Okay, so I think he wrote this book because he saw how he grew from a poor child in a poor background, okay, and become such a billionaire. So he wanted to pass this on, this secret to others. Okay, so but to me this is not complete unless you have you tell yourself you're a good person, and you keep giving thoughts, like you said at the end of your program, that keep talking to yourself about the positive things, the happy things, is so important. Okay, so make this complete. So he wrote the book to, I think it really helps you grow, and he's seen it. He wanted to give it back. He wanted to give it back to the society, give it back to the world, also about whatever I have learned in my life.
Yeah, that is just lovely. And I agree, giving back is essentially what we do with our lives is dependent on what our legacy is, right? How we give back, what kind of things we leave behind, and that really shapes who we were as people, and that's how people will remember us. So I agree, and this has been
Yeah,
really fun. So thank you so much for doing this, and
thank you.
yeah, I had a great
Thanks
time.
for inviting me also.
Yeah, always. I mean,
Thank you.
I had to. This was just perfect. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you. Bye bye.